Hey guys, how's it going? Something a little bit different today. I've decided that I'm going to film myself doing some micarta making. Now, micarta is a fabric-based material, so it can be paper-based material, and it's normally used in knife making. So one of the things about my channel is obviously it's called Samtown's Bladesmith. Although most of my projects recently have been blacksmithing, I am actually more of a bladesmith than a blacksmith. I've been sharing my blacksmithing kind of journey because it is something that I am very interested in. I do love making tools and hope to make a lot more in the future, so you can look forward to a few more videos like that. But I also want to start introducing some of my knife making work into the channel. So today I'm making a set of micarta scales for a customer who wanted fire scales. Now, I didn't have any like dark red, and the red I had was matched to the orange I have. So what we have is bright orange and bright yellow. So basically, this looks really thick for a billet right now, but what will happen is that when it's squished in the press, which I'll show you in a second, it will become a lot thinner. So about that thin. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be our handle material. Obviously, at the moment, it's not a very good knife handle because it's a little too floppy flippy. So, floppy flippy. That's going to become a meme now. Anyway, so I'm just going to show you the gear I've got, and then we'll flip the view around and you can have a look at how I've got this all set up. But first, a very simple micarta press. So all it is basically a 2x4 that I've cut into sections. As you can see here, it's two sections that have been nailed on the sides. Right, it's I believe it's 14 inches long. I like to get about 7 inches per scale because you end up normally losing the rag ends. And then a matching board that fits perfectly in there, and that's your press to press the material. As you can see, it would clamp down. So this is the press. It's really simple, really easy to make. I've knocked this up in like 5 minutes. It didn't take me long at all. I just deburred everything with a file, make sure that there's no, catchy bits, so that when you're going to press, you're not going to get hung up. Because the last thing you need is to waste time while the epoxy is setting. Obviously, I'm wearing nitrile gloves. I have 2 pairs. I make sure that I've got more than I need, because in the end, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And I've got my epoxy, which is, I'm using Digger's fiberglass resin. This is a bright green for some reason, so I'm interested to see how it's going to react with this material. But when I did black and grey micarta, which if you go on my Instagram and my Facebook pages, the link will be down below, the black and grey turned out perfectly. So I'm hoping that this is going to be fine for that. I couldn't find any clear epoxy at my local Bunnings, so I'll have to hunt some more. And then obviously just got my little disposable paint pot with a stirring stick and the catalyst for the epoxy, because without this the epoxy doesn't set. Alright, so I'm just going to pick you up, sorry for the shaky cam, and turn you around. So this is the setup I've got for making micarta. So basically all it is, as you can see, it's clamped both sides. It's just baking paper, the wax paper, and it's obviously you've got the linen material, or this is actually cotton bed sheet material ready to be pressed. Now I cut this out using a rotary cutter and a cutting board to match the shape of this. You want to be slightly undersized on this. The length doesn't so much matter. If you're overhanging, it doesn't matter, but the width, you really want to make sure that the width is right, because otherwise what ends up happening is you get like a cupping kind of action. So, alright, I'm going to get this all set up and I'll show you how I put together my micarta. Okay, so I've got my resin here and my little paint pot. One note I'd like to make right off, I recognize when I open the tin, is you've got to do this in a well-ventilated area, preferably outside. I'm actually out in my backyard at the moment, so I'm not going to have the issue of inhaling too many of these fumes, but if you're in an enclosed area doing this, you're going to start inhaling a lot of these toxic fumes coming off the resin. It's quite evident when you start using it. So anyway, this particular resin, I tend to try and mix a little bit more than I need, but not too much more because it's rather expensive. About that much. There are measurements normally on the tin, and I would suggest going with those, but I've done this enough times that I can normally guesstimate accurately the amount I need. The mixture for the catalyst is actually on the back here, and it'll also be on the tin. So basically, you need to make sure that the resin to catalyst is right. Now I estimate that this is about 400 grams of resin, and it's 2.5 to 3 mils of catalyst per 100 mil, so 100 grams-ish. So I'm going to add about... These catalyst bottles are really, really touchy as well. I'm going to edit most of this out. Now I'm going to underestimate a little bit on the amount, so I reckon that I probably need about 10 mil of the catalyst, but I'm going to go for about 8.5. The reason for that is because you don't want to overdo it too much because it'll harden too fast and then you won't be able to put the resin together at all. So all we do, pour the catalyst in and start mixing. This is going to take a while, so I'm going to turn it off and come back. Okay, so now I've thoroughly mixed in my catalyst to my resin, I can start sticking up the billet. So I'm just going to put this off to the side, and basically all I do, scoop some out. I'm only laying a thin layer down on the bottom to stop the material from moving, and then I just lay down. I normally do it one sheet at a time. I may go to 2 sheets at a time, given how thin this material is. But just using your hands, this is why I wear gloves, you just slowly stack up the pile. You don't have to work too fast. Haste makes waste and all that, so make sure that you're paying attention and do it as accurately as possible, because there's only one shot at this, and once it's done, it's done. Be as liberal as you can with the glue, but obviously don't overdo it. You want to soak the layers in the glue, because this is what's going to create the actual handle material, and the material is simply to hold it together. It's basically creating fiberglass without the glass. The advantage of this over fiberglass is that it's not as fibrous and irritant when it's ground and things like that. It's also a little more flexible, I've found, than a lot of fiberglass variants, in that it's soft and pliant, and the material, once ground, actually gives this really nice in-hand feel. Especially if you leave it at a slightly rougher grit. But it does polish up really nicely, so this handle in particular is going to be polished, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this one comes out. As you can see, even though the epoxy itself is green, it's turning, it's basically going translucent as it is applied. So even though your resin may be a color, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to color your material. If I was trying to do a bright white micarta, then there's a good chance that it would probably color that. But as it is, I'm fairly certain that this one's going to come out just fine. Anyway, I'm going to keep stacking this up and we'll come back when it's ready. Okay guys, so as you can see, I've stacked the billet up. It's all consolidated down now, and as you can see also, it's a very messy thing, so you don't want to do this on your best table, and especially not without the baking paper. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it in the press. So I'm going to put the press here. I've disconnected the baking paper from the table. Just going to wrap it up. Sorry, I'm doing this one-handed, so you'll have to forgive the shaky cam. But yeah, all I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this up, and then I'll come back. Alright, so with the billet wrapped up, as you can see here, now I'm going to place it in the press. The baking paper will stop it from connecting to the press. Now, what you'll find a lot of the time is once you've made the billet, it'll actually widen slightly because the fabric will squish out over each other and overlap. And that's not too bad as long as it's not overly large, so you're getting like a cup shape. So once it's in the press and it's about the right length, I leave these tag ends on. It doesn't really matter. You put the press top on, and then we'll go to a place where I can safely clamp this. Okay, so the reason I said safely clamp this is because when I start to clamp this, what's going to happen is that the glue is going to squirt out both ends. It's already started to drip out this side. So what I'm going to do is, at the start of both ends, I'm going to clamp. These quick grip clamps work really well for this because they don't take long to use. And then from the opposite side, I'm going to do the same thing. And just clamp down firmly as I can. And then I'll just leave this for the amount of time it says on the case, which is normally 24 to 48 hours. And that'll slowly drip. I'm not sure if you can see on the left hand side, there's already a drip of epoxy there. I'm not too worried about getting epoxies in these bricks. This is my outside work area, so it's no big deal. A lot of the time I'll do it on the grass, but obviously today it's raining, so I don't want the press to get wet and the wood to swell and it'll all stick together. So here it is. So in about 24 hours, I'll take that out. I'll cut the ends off and I'll give you guys a look. Quick PSA. When you're putting gloves on for this, as you can see in my hand here, don't mistake your nitrile gloves for latex. I did that today. I said nitrile earlier, I know, but these are actually my latex gloves because I don't have any nitriles at the moment. And latex will melt in the epoxy resin. It melts very slowly, and what happens is the gloves will get very loose on your hands and then they'll start splitting. This specific kind of epoxy actually stings when it sits on your arm or your hand for a while because the chemicals involved actually are acidic. They'll actually eat at your skin a little bit. So all I did was strip the gloves off, put some acetone on a rag and wipe off all of the excess. So just make sure that if you're doing this, either use nitrile gloves. Okay guys, so here we are. 24 hours later, as you can see, this is rock solid, which means that this is probably all set up. The edges of the baking paper almost always end up getting solidified. So we'll just pull these clamps off and we shall see what we've got. Now thankfully, because of the baking paper, most of the time it'll just pop out like that. And the press is ready to go again. So I'll just unwrap this. Most of the time the wrapping comes off okay. If not, you just have to grind it off. But this is coming off quite nicely. Right there it got a little stuck. Okay. And there you go. Here's our piece of micarta. It's rock solid. There's a little bit of gummy residue on the outside. That'll actually set up as I leave this out. It looks like there's a little bit of still setting epoxy there. But that's okay. Now you always get these raggedy ends on the ends of the billet. I have yet to make a billet that didn't have these ragged ends, but that's okay. That's why I make it 14 inches long. It's so that I can cut an inch off each side and still have two 7-inch slabs for scales. Normally my handles aren't more than 5.5 inches long, so 7 inches is way more than I need. So anyway, I'll take this inside and cut one of these edges off, and I'll show you the material pattern inside. So when I'm cutting micarta, I tend to use a hacksaw with a fine tooth because it cuts much like plastic. With the heavier saws, the heavier tooth saws, they tend to grip and rip the material instead of cutting through it, and so you don't get a very clean cut. So I'm just gonna... It cuts kind of like PVC. Cuts relatively fast. Connected by a thread there, and that's the cut end. Now you can't see much of the pattern at the moment. I'll have to sand that back with the grinder, and then we'll take a look. And there you go. That's the pattern after a quick rough 40 grit grind. As you can see, you do get little frayed edges when you try and do square cuts, but it's pretty easy to deburr those. And I normally round everything over when I'm shaping handles anyway. So as you can see at the edges, it's kind of curled upwards a little bit where it's come into contact with the press. And there's a couple of tiny little voids and stuff like that you can see, but those have all filled up with epoxy and hardened. So even if I end up cutting into those, it won't affect the structural integrity of the handle at all. Now, when I started this, it was probably about that thick when compressed with my fingers, but as you can see, after 24 hours in the press and with the epoxy, it's now only maybe just a little over a ½ inch thick, which makes for a good, decent handle thickness on a knife, especially when you add the full tang. So as I said, this one is going to a customer. He wanted a kind of fire looking material, which I thought this is fairly accurate, fairly good for a fire type look. And this will be going on a harpoon clip fighter that I'm making, and I'll upload photos to my Instagram and Facebook when that's done. Anyway, thanks guys. So there you go, that's how I make micarta. It's a fairly short process, it's really easy to do. Obviously all you need is your material and some fiberglass resin, and you're ready to go. My pieces of advice through this video are all very important, especially gloving up. Because it can affect your skin. Some people can be allergic, depending on the brand and the type of resin you're using. The press is incredibly easy. This material is so easy to make, and it's super tough. It's very grippy when wet. It doesn't react to moisture very well. It doesn't swell or anything like that like wood does. It's fairly heat resistant. If you left it maybe out in the sun on a 45-degree day, it might, loosen the epoxy a little bit. But I don't think it would adversely affect it too much. You may find that it will bleach color if you left it out in the sun for quite a while, but I would hope that you're not leaving your knives out in the sun for a long period of time. I've also made little tools with micarta, and I've seen people make rings and stuff like that. Anything that requires an impact is normally, micarta is normally good for that. It's kind of a plastic substitute. It's a lot harder than plastic. It's a lot tougher, I should say, because of the fiber inside it. It tends to resist shock a lot better. You will find if you don't add enough catalyst to your resin, you'll end up with basically it'll flex like a springboard, which isn't really good for making knife handles. If you add too much catalyst, what might happen is that the glue will start setting up as you're trying to layer things. If that happens, basically you got to throw it out and start again. Don't do this on anything that you want to keep, so, don't do it on your brand new dining room table. And, obviously do it outside. Make sure you have the baking paper laid down. And don't wear any clothes that you wouldn't want to get fiberglass resin into, because it will happen and it's impossible to get out. Acetone will take most fiberglass resins off your arms and your hands and your skin, but it won't take it out of your clothes, so make sure you're wearing old work clothes when you make it. Anyway, we're at 145 subscribers as I film this, so I am super happy with how it's going. I'm amazed that everyone wants to join the family and join me in this journey. I've got lots more planned. There's been a lot going on, obviously, with my planning for my wedding, so hopefully I'll manage to keep up the at least one video a week for the next 3 weeks in the lead up to the wedding and then afterwards. I would like to give a quick shout out to Nathan. He probably won't be joining me to help out anymore, because he is now full-time employed somewhere else. So it'll mostly be solo missions from now on until either I find someone else or I get a power hammer. But that's a long time in the future. So anyway, yeah, I'd like to thank everyone who's taken the time to comment, taken the time to hit that like button. And I mean to mention, if you're going to subscribe to me and you want to see more from me, as I upload every week, hopefully twice weekly, you need to hit that little bell icon to get notifications. I've found out recently that YouTube has an algorithm that basically doesn't send you a notification unless you're asking for notifications. So if you want to see more from me and you want to make sure that you're keeping up to date with everything that I'm doing, please hit that little bell icon, and that way you'll be able to find out when I'm uploading my next video. Anyway, with that said, thank you all. I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers.